Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who looks the most helpless. When Sarah Mitchell walked into that warehouse on a cold October night in 2019, her captors saw exactly what they wanted to see. A small, quiet woman in her early 30s who worked as a marine biology consultant.
What they didn't see was the scar hidden beneath her sleeve from a Taliban bullet in Afghanistan, or the calloused hands that had once assembled explosives in complete darkness, or the mind that had been trained to turn any situation into a tactical advantage. They thought they had captured an easy target for ransom.
Instead, they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives, because Sarah Mitchell wasn't just any consultant. She was Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, retired Navy SEAL, and she was about to remind them why elite Special Forces operatives never truly retire from being dangerous.
What happened over the next 72 hours would become a case study in military academies and a legend whispered in the special operations community. This is the true story of how underestimating the wrong person can cost you everything.
The rain drummed against the windshield of Sarah Mitchell's rental car as she pulled into the industrial district of Portland, Oregon. The GPS on her phone showed she was only 2 blocks away from the marine research facility where she was supposed to meet Dr.
James Harrison about a consulting contract. The job seemed straightforward enough, analyzing water samples from a proposed underwater mining operation off the coast.
It was the kind of work that paid well and kept her busy since leaving the military 3 years ago. Sarah had built a successful consulting business, helping companies navigate environmental regulations for their ocean-based operations. Her clients knew her as a thorough professional marine biologist with an impressive academic background from Stanford. What they didn't know was that her real education had come from 8 years as a Navy SEAL, including 3 deployments to Afghanistan and 2 classified operations she could never discuss. At 32, Sarah had deliberately crafted an unremarkable civilian appearance. She wore her brown hair in a simple ponytail, dressed in practical clothes that didn't draw attention, and spoke in the measured tones of someone who spent their time analyzing data rather than kicking down doors in hostile territory. The transformation had been intentional and complete. She wanted nothing more than to leave her military past behind and build a quiet, normal life. The warehouse district was darker than she had expected. Street lights were few and far between, and several of the buildings appeared abandoned. Sarah felt the familiar tingle of awareness that she hadn't experienced since leaving the service, the instinctive recognition that something wasn't quite right. She had learned to trust that feeling during her military career, but tonight she pushed it aside. This was Portland, Oregon, not Kandahar province. She was meeting a marine biologist, not hunting Taliban fighters. Dr. Harrison had been specific about the location. Building 47, 3rd floor, Suite 3B. The building looked legitimate enough from the outside, though older and more worn than she had expected for a research facility. Sarah parked her car under one of the few working streetlights and gathered her briefcase. Inside were water testing equipment, sample containers, and her laptop with the preliminary research she had done on the mining project. The lobby of the building was dimly lit but clean. An elevator took her to the 3rd floor, where she found Suite 3B at the end of a long hallway. The door was unmarked except for the suite number. Sarah knocked and waited. "Come in," called a voice from inside. Sarah turned the handle and stepped into what should have been an office but looked more like an empty conference room. A single folding table sat in the center with 2 chairs on opposite sides. The man who greeted her was not the Dr. Harrison she had spoken with on the phone. This man was younger, muscular, with tattoos covering his forearms and a scar across his left cheek. "Ms. Mitchell?" he asked with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Yes, I'm here to meet Dr. Harrison about the water analysis project," Sarah replied, her hand still on the door handle. "Oh, the doctor is running a little late. Why don't you have a seat and we'll get started?" Every instinct Sarah had developed during her military training was now screaming danger. The man's stance, the way his eyes kept flicking to her hands, the complete absence of any research equipment or marine biology materials. Everything about the situation was wrong. She started to step backward toward the door. "Actually, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'll wait for Dr. Harrison in the lobby." "I don't think so," the man said, and his friendly demeanor vanished completely. 2 more men emerged from a doorway Sarah hadn't noticed when she entered. They were both large, both armed, and both moving to cut off her escape route. The first man pulled a pistol from under his jacket. "Have a seat, Ms. Mitchell. We need to have a conversation." Sarah's mind immediately shifted into tactical assessment mode. 3 armed men,
Unknown weapons beyond the visible pistol. Single exit blocked, no cover in the room. No backup, no one expecting her for another 2 hours.
In her SEAL days, this would have been classified as a worst-case scenario. But she had survived worst-case scenarios before.
What do you want? She asked, moving slowly toward the chair but keeping her body position ready to react. Information, the leader replied.
Specifically information about your work with Oceanic Mining Solutions. Sarah's confusion was genuine. I've never worked with any company by that name.
You must have me confused with someone else. The man laughed. Nice try.
We know all about your consulting work with them last year, the underwater surveys, the environmental assessments, the locations of their planned mining operations.
We know you have access to their systems and their data. I think you have the wrong person, Sarah said firmly.
I can show you my client list if you want. I've never heard of Oceanic Mining Solutions. One of the other men stepped forward. Maybe she needs some encouragement to remember. The leader held up a hand.
Let's start simple. We know you're Sarah Mitchell, marine biology consultant.
We know you live at 1247 Oak Street in San Francisco. We know you drive a blue Honda Civic. License plate 7G4, H829.
We know you graduated from Stanford with a doctorate in marine biology.
We know you charge $200 an hour for consulting work. We know a lot about you, Sarah.
The details were accurate, which meant these men had done their research, but they had gotten something fundamentally wrong about her background and her client history. Sarah realized she was dealing with either a case of mistaken identity or someone who had bad information about her work. I can prove to you that you have the wrong person, Sarah said.
My laptop has records of all my consulting work. I can show you every client, every project, every payment. You'll see that I've never worked with the company you mentioned. The leader considered this for a moment. Okay, let's see what you've got. But don't try anything stupid. My friends here get nervous when people make sudden movements.
Sarah slowly opened her briefcase and removed her laptop. As she powered it on, she was calculating distances, angles, and possibilities. The three men had relaxed slightly now that they thought she was cooperating. The leader was standing about 6 feet away. The other two were near the door but no longer in combat-ready positions. If she was going to act, it would have to be soon. The laptop finished booting up, and Sarah opened her client database.
See, here are all my projects for the last 3 years. Environmental consulting for harbor development, water quality analysis for shipping companies, marine impact studies for construction projects.
No underwater mining, no oceanic mining solutions. The leader leaned forward to look at the screen, moving closer than Sarah had hoped. This was her chance. In one fluid motion, Sarah slammed the laptop closed and drove it into the man's face, while simultaneously rolling backward off the chair.
The leader stumbled backward, blood streaming from his broken nose, and Sarah was already moving toward the second man. Her years of hand-to-hand combat training took over as she grabbed his gun hand and twisted, using his own momentum to drive him into the wall.
The third man was reaching for his weapon when Sarah spun and kicked him in the knee. He went down hard, and she was on top of him immediately, applying a chokehold that would render him unconscious in seconds. But the leader had recovered faster than she expected. Still bleeding from his broken nose, he had picked up his pistol and was pointing it directly at her head. That was very impressive, he said, breathing heavily. But now you're going to pay for it. Sarah released the chokehold and slowly stood up, hands raised. The man she had choked was unconscious, and the second man was groaning on the floor, clutching his twisted wrist. But the leader was still standing, still armed, and still very angry. Zip tie her hands, he ordered the injured man, and check her for weapons.
As plastic restraints were secured around her wrists, Sarah's mind was already working on her next move.
They had assumed she was helpless once restrained. They had assumed her cooperation meant submission. And most importantly, they had assumed they knew who they were dealing with. They were about to learn that Sarah Mitchell was not the easy target they thought they had captured. But for now, she would let them believe they were in control. Sometimes the best tactical advantage came from being underestimated.
The leader wiped blood from his nose and smiled coldly. Now we're going to have a much longer conversation.
And if you try anything like that again, it won't end well for you. Sarah nodded submissively, but inside she was already planning her escape. These men might have captured her, but they had no idea what they had actually gotten themselves into. Her SEAL training had taught her that being captured was never the end of a mission. It was just the beginning of a new phase. And this phase was
about to get very interesting for everyone involved. The unconscious man was starting to stir, and the leader was checking his broken nose in a small mirror he had pulled from his pocket.
Neither of them noticed Sarah testing the strength of the zip ties or memorizing the layout of the room. They thought the hard part was over. They were wrong. The leader, who introduced himself only as Marcus, spent the next hour trying to convince Sarah to cooperate. They had moved her to a different room in the warehouse, this one with a single chair in the center and no windows. Her hands remained zip-tied behind her back, and one of the other men, the one whose wrist she had injured, stood guard by the door with obvious resentment.
"Let's try this again," Marcus said, pulling up another chair to sit across from her.
Oceanic Mining Solutions hired you last year to conduct environmental assessments for their deep-sea mining operation. We know this because we have bank records showing payments from their subsidiary companies to your business account.
Sarah kept her expression neutral, but internally she was processing this new information. If they had actual bank records, this wasn't a case of mistaken identity.
Someone was using her name and her business for operations she knew nothing about. The implications were deeply troubling.
"I'm telling you the truth," she replied. "I keep meticulous records of all my work. If someone received payments under my business name, then someone is either impersonating me or has gained access to my accounts without my knowledge."
Marcus studied her face carefully. He was clearly experienced at reading people, and Sarah could see him weighing her responses. She decided to take a calculated risk.
"Look, if what you're saying is true, then someone has been using my identity to commit fraud. That makes me as much a victim as anyone else."
"Why don't you tell me exactly what you think I did, and maybe we can figure out what's really going on here?" The injured man by the door snorted. "She's playing games with you, Marcus."
Let me have 10 minutes with her and she'll tell us everything. Marcus held up a hand. Not yet, Tony.
"Let's see what she has to say first." He turned back to Sarah. Oceanic Mining Solutions was planning a massive deep-sea mining operation in international waters off the coast of Chile. They needed environmental impact assessments to satisfy their investors and insurance companies. According to our information, they hired your company to conduct water quality testing, marine life surveys, and geological assessments. Sarah listened carefully, filing away every detail. When was this supposed to have happened? Between March and September of last year. 5 separate trips to Chile, each lasting 2 to 3 weeks. Total payments of $450,000. The number made Sarah's breath catch. That was more money than her legitimate consulting business had made in the entire 3 years since she left the military.
If someone was operating under her name and receiving payments like that, it represented a sophisticated identity theft operation. I was never in Chile last year, Sarah said firmly.
"I can prove it. My passport will show all my travel. My credit card records will show where I was. My legitimate clients will confirm the work I was actually doing."
Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Prove it how? Your passport could have been doctored. Your credit cards could have been cloned." "My clients included the Port of San Francisco, the California Department of Environmental Protection, and the U.S. Coast Guard," Sarah replied. "These aren't organizations that participate in identity fraud. And if you really have done your homework on me, you know I worked on a major environmental assessment for a proposed harbor expansion that was in the news for 6 months.
That project alone can account for my whereabouts during most of the time period you're talking about." For the first time since the interrogation began, Marcus looked uncertain. Sarah pressed her advantage. "More importantly, if I had been involved in whatever this mining operation was, why would I be sitting here denying it? If I was guilty, wouldn't I be trying to negotiate or offering to help you? Why would I risk making you angry by claiming ignorance?" The third man, who had been silent until now, spoke up from his position near the back wall. "Maybe because she knows we're not here to negotiate. Maybe she thinks playing dumb is her best chance of getting out of this alive." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The implication was clear. These men weren't planning to let her go regardless of whether she cooperated. She began to reassess her situation.
This wasn't a kidnapping for ransom or information. This was something much more dangerous.
"What exactly happened with this mining operation?" she asked. "Why are you looking for me?" Marcus exchanged a glance with the other 2 men. After a moment, he seemed to make a decision. "Oceanic Mining Solutions was a front company," he said. "The mining operation was cover for something else entirely. The environmental assessments you supposedly conducted were used to identify the best locations for, let's call them alternative operations. The real purpose was to map underwater terrain for submarine access routes."
Sarah's military background immediately filled in the blanks. Submarine access routes meant naval operations, which meant military or intelligence activities.
If someone was using her identity to conduct reconnaissance for foreign naval operations, she was looking at charges of espionage and treason. "Who are you people?" she asked.
"That's not important right now," Marcus replied. "What's important is that 6 months ago, the Chilean Navy intercepted communications about these underwater routes. 3 weeks ago, they arrested a team of Chinese naval intelligence officers who were using the data from your environmental reports to plan infiltration routes into Chilean territorial waters." The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, and Sarah realized just how much trouble she was in. Someone had used her identity to conduct espionage operations against a U.S. ally. Even if she could prove her innocence, the investigation would destroy her business and possibly her freedom. The Chinese officers had detailed environmental data, geological surveys, and marine life patterns that could only have come from extensive on-site research, Marcus continued.
Research that was supposedly conducted by Dr. Sarah Mitchell of Mitchell Marine Consulting. "But I didn't do any of that research," Sarah protested.
"Maybe you didn't," Marcus said, "but someone using your credentials did."
And now the Chilean government wants answers. More importantly, our government wants answers.
The revelation that these men were working for the U.S. government changed everything. If they were federal agents, then this was an official investigation, not a kidnapping. But their methods were highly irregular, and Sarah's SEAL training told her that something was still not right about the situation. "If you're federal agents, why am I zip-tied in a warehouse instead of being interviewed at a federal building with lawyers present?" she asked. Tony laughed harshly. "Because this is a matter of national security, and we don't have time for lawyers and paperwork. People are dead because of your work, lady." "What do you mean people are dead?" Marcus leaned forward. "The Chilean Navy patrol boat that intercepted the Chinese team was attacked by unknown forces. 7 Chilean sailors were killed. The attack was precisely timed and executed, using detailed knowledge of Chilean patrol routes and communication protocols, knowledge that was included in the intelligence package that originated from your environmental reports." Sarah felt sick. If what these men were telling her was true, then whoever had stolen her identity had contributed to the deaths of 7 people. The weight of that realization was almost overwhelming, even though she knew she wasn't responsible. "I need to contact the FBI," she said. "This is clearly a case of identity theft being used for espionage.
The real perpetrators are still out there while you're wasting time with me."
"The FBI is aware of the situation," Marcus replied. "But there are complications."
The evidence trail leads directly to you. Your business licenses, your academic credentials, your professional references, everything checks out. From the outside, it looks like Dr. Sarah Mitchell conducted this research personally. Then someone has been planning this for a very long time," Sarah said. "They would need access to my personal information, my business records, my academic history. They would need to be able to travel using my identity and conduct sophisticated technical work in my name. This isn't some amateur identity theft." The unnamed third man stepped forward.
"Or maybe you're exactly who we think you are, and you're very good at covering your tracks." Sarah turned to look at him directly. For the first time, she allowed some of her military bearing to show through her civilian facade. "If I were running an espionage operation, do you really think I would be stupid enough to use my real name and business? Do you think I would leave a paper trail leading directly back to my home address?
Do you think I would be sitting here having this conversation instead of being halfway around the world with a new identity?" The room fell silent. Sarah could see the men processing her words, and she could tell that Marcus, at least, was starting to have doubts about their assumptions.
"There's another possibility you haven't considered," Sarah continued. "What if whoever did this specifically chose my identity because of my background? What if they knew that a marine biology consultant with legitimate credentials would be the perfect cover for this kind of operation?" "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. "I mean, what if they researched marine biology consultants and specifically selected me because my credentials would stand up to scrutiny? What if this whole thing was designed to make me the fall guy?" It was a plausible theory, and Sarah could see that it was making an impact. But she also knew that these men were under pressure to solve a case that had resulted in deaths and international incidents. They needed someone to blame, and she was the obvious target. "Even if that's true," Marcus said finally, "we still need to figure out who actually conducted this research and how they got access to your identity. And we need to do it quickly before more people get killed." Sarah nodded. "Then untie me and let's work together to find the real culprits. Because right now, they're out there planning their next operation while you're interrogating the wrong person." Marcus considered this for a long moment. Sarah could see him weighing the risks and benefits of trusting her. Finally, he stood up and walked toward the door. "I need to make some phone calls."
he said to the other two men. Watch her carefully, and if she tries anything, you have permission to use whatever force is necessary. After Marcus left, Sarah was alone with Tony and the unnamed third man. She knew this was when things would get most dangerous. Marcus seemed like a professional who was willing to consider evidence. These two looked like they had already made up their minds about her guilt. She also knew that her window for escape was closing rapidly. Once Marcus returned with orders from his superiors, her options would become much more limited. It was time to start putting her SEAL training to work. With Marcus gone, the atmosphere in the room shifted dramatically. Tony flexed his injured wrist and glared at Sarah with undisguised hostility. The third man, who Sarah had mentally dubbed Silent Sam because of his minimal participation in the conversation, moved closer to her chair. You know what I think? Tony said, his voice carrying a threatening edge. I think you're playing all of us. I think you're exactly who Marcus thinks you are, and you're just buying time until your backup arrives. Sarah kept her voice calm and steady. Nobody even knows where I am. Bullshit, Silent Sam spoke up. Professional operatives always have extraction plans. Your people are probably already mobilizing. The accusation revealed something important. These men genuinely believed she was a foreign agent. They weren't just investigating identity theft. They thought they had captured an active spy. That explained their willingness to use irregular methods and their reluctance to involve lawyers or follow standard procedures. Look at me, Sarah said, meeting each man's eyes in turn. Really look at me. Do I look like a spy to you? Do I act like someone who's been trained in espionage? If I were a professional operative, don't you think I would have handled the situation in the other room differently? Tony snorted. You handled it pretty well for a marine biologist. Most consultants don't know how to break someone's nose with a laptop or apply military-grade chokeholds. Sarah realized she had made a tactical error. Her combat training had automatically taken over when she was threatened, but now it was being used as evidence against her. She needed to address this directly. I took self-defense classes after a mugging in San Francisco 2 years ago. She lied smoothly. The instructor was an ex-military guy who taught us some basic techniques. When you're a woman traveling alone for business, you learn to protect yourself. It was a plausible explanation, but Sarah could see that neither man was completely buying it. Her movements had been too practiced, too efficient for someone with basic self-defense training. Silent Sam pulled out his phone and started typing. I'm running a deeper background check on her, he announced. If she's telling the truth about being just a consultant, we should be able to verify everything. While Sam worked on his phone, Tony continued his interrogation. Tell me about your time at Stanford. Who were your professors? What was your dissertation about? Give me details that we can verify. Sarah provided the information willingly. Her academic credentials were completely legitimate, and she knew that any verification would support her cover story. What she was worried about was how deep their background check would go. If they access classified military records, they might discover her real history. My dissertation was on the effects of deep-sea mining on marine ecosystems, she said. My advisor was Dr. Patricia Chen, who still teaches there. I focused specifically on how sediment disruption affects benthic communities. Tony wrote down the details. What about your work history before you started consulting? This was the dangerous question. Sarah's official cover story was that she had worked for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration before starting her own business. NOAA was a civilian agency, and her employment records there would show her working as a marine biologist. What they wouldn't show was that she had actually been detailed to NOAA as a cover assignment between her military deployments. I worked for NOAA for 5 years, she said. Marine Protected Areas Division. I conducted environmental assessments for proposed sanctuary sites. Silent Sam looked up from his phone. That's interesting. I'm not finding any record of you working for NOAA. Sarah's heart rate increased, but she kept her expression neutral. Check again. I was in the Marine Protected Areas Center in Silver Spring, Maryland. Sam typed some more, then frowned. Nothing. Nothing called Bob. No employment records, no email accounts, no mention in any NOAA publications or reports. This was very bad news. Either Sam had access to databases that showed her NOAA assignment had been a military cover, or someone had systematically erased her employment records. Both possibilities suggested a level of official involvement that made her situation much more precarious. That's impossible, Sarah said, allowing genuine confusion to show in her voice. I worked there for 5 years. I have pay stubs, tax records, performance evaluations. How can there be no record of my employment? Tony and Sam exchanged a meaningful look.
Professional operatives often have their legitimate employment records scrubbed to maintain their cover, Tony said. The fact that we can't find evidence of your NOAA employment actually supports the theory that you're not who you claim to be. This is a professional paradox.
If they found records of her NOAA employment, it would lead them to discover her military background. If they didn't find records, they would conclude she was a spy with a fabricated cover story.
Either way, her civilian identity was compromised. She decided to take another calculated risk.
What if I told you that there are aspects of my background that I haven't mentioned, but they're not what you think they are? Both men immediately became more alert. What kind of aspects? Tony demanded.
Sarah took a deep breath. She was about to reveal information that could completely change the dynamic of the situation. But she was running out of alternatives.
What if I told you that I have a military background, but it's not related to espionage? The room fell completely silent. Sam stopped typing on his phone, and Tony leaned forward in his chair. What kind of military background? Sam asked.
8 years. I separated 3 years ago and started the consulting business. Tony stood up abruptly.
What was your rate? What units were you assigned to?
Sarah hesitated.
Once she revealed her SEAL background, there would be no going back. These men would either see her as a valuable asset or as an even more dangerous threat.
I was a naval special warfare operator, she said quietly. The effect was immediate and dramatic.
Both men stepped back from her chair, and Tony's hand moved instinctively toward his weapon. "You're a fucking SEAL," he said, his voice a mixture of respect and alarm.
Sarah nodded. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, SEAL Team 7.
I did 3 deployments to Afghanistan and 2 classified operations I can't discuss. Sam was already on his phone, presumably calling Marcus.
"You need to get back here right now," Sarah heard him say. "We have a situation." Tony was staring at her with a new appreciation for the danger she represented.
That explains the combat skills, but it makes everything else more complicated. Actually, it makes everything less complicated, Sarah said. Think about it. If I were really involved in espionage against the United States, would I reveal my SEAL background?
That would be the stupidest thing a spy could do. Sam ended his phone call and looked at her suspiciously. Unless revealing it is part of a deeper cover story.
Unless you're playing an even more sophisticated game. Or unless I'm telling the truth, and someone else has been using my identity for espionage, Sarah replied. Someone who knew that my legitimate credentials would stand up to scrutiny and who also knew that my military background would be classified and difficult to verify. Tony was pacing now, clearly agitated by this new development. If you're really a SEAL, then you're trained in exactly the kinds of skills that would be needed for the operations we're investigating. Underwater reconnaissance, technical intelligence gathering, covert operations planning.
Yes, Sarah agreed.
Which makes me either the perfect perpetrator or the perfect fall guy, depending on your perspective. The door opened and Marcus hurried back into the room. Sam immediately briefed him on Sarah's revelation about her military background.
Marcus listened without interruption, his expression growing more serious with each detail. When Sam finished, Marcus turned to Sarah. "If you're really military, then this changes everything. We need to verify your service record and contact your former commanding officers." "My service records are classified," Sarah said, "but you can contact Captain James Rodriguez at Naval Special Warfare Command. He was my last CO before I separated." Marcus pulled out his phone and stepped away to make the call. While he spoke in hushed tones, Tony and Sam continued to watch Sarah with a mixture of wariness and confusion. After several minutes, Marcus ended his call and returned to the group. His demeanor had changed completely. "I just spoke with Captain Rodriguez," he said. "He confirms your service record and your separation date. He also said something very interesting." Marcus paused, studying Sarah's face carefully. "He said that 2 months ago, someone claiming to be from the Department of Defense contacted him asking for verification of your service record and your areas of expertise. Specifically, they wanted to know about your experience with underwater operations and environmental reconnaissance." Sarah felt a chill run through her.
What did he tell them?
He told them that such information was classified and referred them to the appropriate official channels, but Captain Rodriguez was suspicious about the request because it came through irregular channels and the person asking couldn't provide proper authorization codes.
The implications were staggering. Someone had been researching Sarah's military background months before the espionage operation took place. This wasn't random identity theft. It was a carefully planned operation designed to use her specific credentials and expertise as cover. "Did Captain Rodriguez report this contact?" Sarah asked. Marcus nodded. "He filed a report with Naval Criminal Investigative Service.
but apparently it was classified as a low-priority security inquiry.
Until now, Tony looked confused. So what are you saying?
That someone specifically targeted her identity for this operation? That's exactly what I'm saying, Marcus replied. This wasn't a case of random identity theft.
Someone researched active and former military personnel with the right expertise, selected Sarah as their target, and spent months building a cover operation using her credentials. Sam was still skeptical.
But how would they get access to her classified service record? How would they know enough about her background to impersonate her convincingly? Sarah had been thinking about the same question.
There are only a few ways someone could get that information. Either they have access to classified military databases, or she trailed off as a disturbing possibility occurred to her.
Or what? Marcus prompted. Or someone with legitimate access to my service record was involved in the operation. The room fell silent as everyone processed the implications of what Sarah had just suggested.
If she was right, then they weren't just dealing with foreign espionage, they were dealing with treason by someone inside the U.S. military or intelligence community.
Marcus's phone rang, interrupting the tense silence. He answered it and listened for several minutes, asking only brief questions.
When he ended the call, his expression was grim. "That was my supervisor," he said.
"We just received intelligence that there are at least 3 other former military personnel whose identities may have been compromised in similar operations. All of them have expertise that would be valuable for espionage activities." Sarah felt a mixture of relief and alarm. Relief that she was no longer the only suspect, but alarm at the scope of what they were apparently dealing with. "This is much bigger than we thought," Marcus continued. "And if you're telling the truth, then you're not a suspect, you're a victim. But you're also our best lead for finding out who's really behind this." Tony looked at Sarah with new respect.
"She's really innocent, then she's also in serious danger. Whoever did this has to know that we've connected the dots back to the identity theft. They'll want to eliminate any evidence that could lead back to them." The realization hit Sarah like a physical blow. She wasn't just being investigated for espionage, she was potentially a target for assassination by whoever had stolen her identity. "We need to get you somewhere safe," Marcus said. "And then we need to work together to find out who's really behind this before they strike again." Sarah looked around the room at the 3 men who had captured her just hours ago. "Does this mean you're going to untie me?" Marcus smiled grimly as he pulled out a knife to cut her restraints. "Welcome to the team, Lieutenant Commander. We've got work to do." The safe house was a nondescript apartment in a residential neighborhood 15 minutes from the warehouse. As they drove through the Portland streets, Sarah learned more about the team that had captured her. Marcus was DEA, Tony was FBI, and Silent Sam, whose real name was David Chen, was CIA. They had been assembled as a joint task force to investigate what had initially appeared to be a straightforward case of espionage for hire. "The original intelligence came from our allies in Chile and naval intelligence," Marcus explained as they climbed the stairs to the 3rd-floor apartment. "They intercepted communications about the planned infiltration and traced the environmental data back to your business." Sarah rubbed her wrists where the zip ties had left marks. "How long have you been tracking this operation?" 6 weeks, David replied. "But we've been tracking similar operations for almost a year. This is the first time we've been able to identify a specific individual involved in the data collection." The apartment was sparsely furnished but well equipped with communications gear and computer equipment. Tony immediately began setting up a secure communication link with their headquarters, while David started pulling files from a briefcase full of documents. "Show me what you have," Sarah said, settling into a chair at the dining table where David was spreading out photographs and reports. The evidence was comprehensive and damning. Bank records showed payments totaling nearly $500,000 to Mitchell Marine Consulting from various shell companies. Travel records indicated trips to Chile, Ecuador, and Colombia that corresponded with the supposed field research. Most disturbing were the environmental reports themselves. Detailed professional documents that bore her name and demonstrated extensive knowledge of marine biology and underwater terrain. "This is sophisticated work," Sarah said, studying one of the reports. "Whoever wrote this knows what they're doing. The scientific methodology is sound, the data appears legitimate, and the writing style is professional," Marcus nodded. "That's what made it so convincing. These aren't amateur fake documents. They're the kind of reports that would pass scrutiny from environmental agencies, insurance companies, and government regulators." Sarah continued reading, looking for any clues that might reveal the real author. The writing style was professional but generic. It could have been produced by any number of qualified marine biologists. However, there were subtle technical details that suggested the author had more than just academic knowledge.
Look at this section on underwater visibility and current patterns, she said, pointing to a paragraph in one of the reports. This level of detail about how environmental conditions affect underwater operations isn't something you'd learn in a standard marine biology program.
This is operational knowledge. David leaned over her shoulder to read the passage.
What do you mean?
I mean, whoever wrote this has actually conducted underwater reconnaissance missions. They know how water temperature affects diving equipment, how current patterns influence approach routes, how marine life behavior can compromise stealth operations. This is military knowledge, not civilian research. Tony looked up from his communications equipment.
So we're looking for someone with both marine biology credentials and military diving experience? That's a much smaller pool of suspects, Sarah agreed. How many former military divers have the academic background to produce reports this sophisticated? Marcus was already pulling out his phone.
I'm going to have our people run a cross-reference of former Navy divers with advanced degrees in marine sciences. That should give us a manageable list of suspects.
While Marcus made his call, Sarah continued studying the documents. Something was bothering her about the timeline of events, but she couldn't quite identify what it was.
When exactly were these reports supposed to have been completed, she asked David. David consulted a timeline chart.
The first report was dated March 15th of last year. The final report was submitted September 8th.
Sarah thought back to her actual activities during that time period. So, I was working on the harbor expansion project for the Port of San Francisco during most of that period. The work required me to be on site in California almost continuously from February through October.
Can you prove that? Tony asked.
Absolutely. The Port Authority has detailed records of my site visits, and the local media covered the project extensively. There are probably photos and video footage of me at public hearings and press conferences throughout that time period.
David was already typing on his laptop. I'm pulling up news archives from the San Francisco area. After a few minutes, he turned the screen toward Sarah.
Is this you?
The photograph showed Sarah standing at a podium during what appeared to be a public hearing. The caption identified her as Dr. Sarah Mitchell, marine biology consultant for the Harbor Expansion Project. The date stamp showed May 22nd of the previous year.
That's me, Sarah confirmed. And according to your timeline, I was supposed to be in Chile conducting underwater surveys on that exact date. Marcus ended his phone call and rejoined the group. I've got our research team working on the suspect list. They'll have preliminary results within the hour. He looked at the laptop screen.
What did you find? Tony summarized their discovery about Sarah's verifiable whereabouts during the time period in question.
Marcus studied the timeline and nodded. This confirms that someone else was conducting the operations in your name. But it also raises new questions.
How did they manage to use your identity for international travel? How did they get past passport control and customs? Sarah had been wondering about the same thing.
They would need either a passport issued in my name or access to someone who could travel under official cover that wouldn't require normal documentation.
Official cover? David asked.
Military or intelligence operatives sometimes travel under official passport cover that doesn't go through normal customs channels. If someone with that kind of access was involved, they could have conducted the field research without leaving the usual paper trail. The implications were sobering. If Sarah was right, they were dealing with someone who had access to official travel documents and the authorization to use them for covert operations.
Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message. He read it and frowned.
We have a problem. My supervisor says there's been a development in the case.
Another identity theft victim has been found, but this one is different.
Different how?
Sarah asked.
This one is dead. The room fell silent. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she realized how much danger she had been in without knowing it.
Who was it? David asked.
Marcus consulted his phone again. Former Marine Corps reconnaissance specialist named James Patterson. He separated from the service 2 years ago and had been working as a private security consultant. Someone used his identity to conduct reconnaissance of military installations in Eastern Europe.
Tony looked grim. When was he killed? His body was found 3 days ago, but the medical examiner thinks he's been dead for at least 2 weeks. It was made to look like a diving accident. Sarah's blood ran cold.
A diving accident? He was found in his diving gear in a lake about 50 miles from his home in Virginia. Local police initially ruled it accidental, but the FBI took a closer look when his name came up in connection with our investigation.
The message was clear. Whoever was behind the identity theft operation was willing to kill to protect their secret. And Sarah had been their next target. We need to assume that whoever killed Patterson knows we've identified Sarah as another victim, David said. They'll be looking for ways to eliminate her before she can provide information that leads back to them. Marcus nodded. Which means we need to find them before they find us. And we need to do it fast. Sarah stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street below.
Her SEAL training had taught her to assess threats and plan responses, but this situation was unlike anything she had faced during her military career. "What about the other potential victims you mentioned?" she asked. "The ones whose identities might have been compromised?" "We're trying to contact them now," Marcus replied. "But if Patterson's death is any indication, we may be too late for some of them." Sarah turned back to the group.
Then we need to think like the people we're hunting. They're professional, they have access to classified information, and they're willing to kill to protect their operation.
They're also smart enough to know that killing all the identity theft victims would attract too much attention. "What are you suggesting?" Tony asked.
"I'm suggesting that they're going to try to eliminate the investigation rather than all the victims. They're going to target the people who can connect the dots and build a case against them."
David understood immediately. "They're going to target us." "Exactly.
Which means we need to finish this investigation before they can stop us. We need to identify them, gather evidence, and take them down before they eliminate everyone who knows about the operation." Marcus was already reaching for his phone again. "I'm calling for backup. We need a full tactical team and surveillance support."
"Wait," Sarah said. "If you bring in a full team, you'll alert whoever's behind this that we're closing in."
They'll disappear or accelerate their timeline for eliminating witnesses. "So what do you suggest?" Marcus asked.
Sarah smiled grimly, and for the first time since her capture, she allowed her full military bearing to show. "I suggest we stop playing defense and start playing offense."
"You wanted to find out who's really behind this operation? Let's set a trap and make them come to us."
Tony looked skeptical. "What kind of trap? The kind that uses their own methods against them?"
"They've been using stolen identities to conduct operations, right? So let's give them a new identity to steal. Let's create an irresistible target and see who shows up to take the bait." David was already seeing the possibilities.
"You want to set up a fake identity that would be valuable for their next operation?"
Not fake, Sarah corrected. Real.
We create a legitimate marine biology consultant with exactly the kind of credentials and expertise they're looking for. We give this person a project that would be perfect for their purposes, and then we wait to see who tries to steal the identity. Marcus considered the plan. It's risky. If we're wrong about how they operate, we could be wasting valuable time while they eliminate other witnesses. If we're right, Sarah countered, we'll have them in our sights within 48 hours.
And once we know who they are, we can move against them before they can hurt anyone else. The room was quiet as everyone weighed the risks and benefits of Sarah's proposal.
Finally, Marcus made the decision. "Okay, we'll try it. But we do this by the book, with full backup and surveillance. And if it goes wrong, we abort immediately and go back to conventional investigation methods."
Sarah nodded. "Agreed.
"But I have one condition." "What's that?" "I'm the bait. I'm the consultant we're going to dangle in front of them.
They've already used my identity once, so they know it works. Let's see if they want to use it again."
Tony shook his head. "Absolutely not. You're a victim, not an undercover operative.
"We're not putting you at risk." "I'm not a victim," Sarah said firmly.
"I'm a Navy SEAL with 8 years of operational experience. And right now I'm the best chance we have of catching the people who killed Patterson and are planning to kill others."
She looked around the room at the 3 federal agents who had become her unlikely allies. Besides, they made this personal when they used my name to commit espionage and murder.
"I want to be the one who brings them down." The plan they developed was elegant in its simplicity. Sarah would resume her normal consulting activities, but with one significant addition: a new project that would be irresistible to anyone planning underwater reconnaissance operations. Working with the task force, she created a proposal for environmental impact assessment of a proposed underwater cable installation between the United States and a classified military communication facility. The project was real enough to withstand scrutiny, but designed to attract the attention of foreign intelligence services.
The underwater cable route would require detailed surveys of ocean floor terrain, current patterns, and marine life in areas that were strategically important for naval operations. It was exactly the kind of project that would provide cover for espionage activities.
Sarah returned to San Francisco and her normal business routine, but now she was under constant surveillance by a joint FBI-CIA team. Every phone call was monitored, every email was tracked, and every person who made contact with her business was investigated.
The task force was betting that whoever had stolen her identity before would try to do it again when they learned about the cable project. For 3 days, nothing happened. Sarah conducted legitimate business meetings, worked on real projects, and waited for someone to take the bait.
The surveillance team reported no unusual activity, no suspicious contacts, no indication that anyone was showing interest in her new project. On the 4th day, everything changed.
Sarah was in her office reviewing water quality data when her business phone rang. The caller identified himself as Dr. P.O.T. Watch, Robert Chen from the Pacific Research Institute, a name and organization that didn't appear in any of her professional directories. Dr. Mitchell, the caller said, I understand you're working on the underwater cable project for the Defense Communications Agency. We have a research vessel that might be perfect for your needs, and we'd like to discuss a possible partnership. Sarah's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice professionally neutral. I'm always interested in discussing research partnerships. Could you tell me more about your organization? Of course. We specialize in deep-sea research and environmental monitoring. We have experience working with defense contractors on sensitive projects. Perhaps we could meet to discuss how we might collaborate on your cable survey work. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, with Dr. Chen demonstrating impressive knowledge of underwater survey techniques and environmental assessment protocols. He suggested they meet at a restaurant in Chinatown the following evening. After ending the call, Sarah immediately contacted Marcus using the secure communication system they had established. Within minutes, the entire task force was analyzing the call and researching the Pacific Research Institute. No record of that organization in any legitimate research databases, David reported. The phone number traces to a burner phone purchased with cash 3 days ago. Tony was running background checks on the name Robert Chen. Hundreds of Robert Chens in California, but none with credentials in marine research. This is definitely our guy. Marcus was coordinating with the surveillance team. We'll have the restaurant under full surveillance, audio, video, tactical teams positioned nearby. If this goes wrong, we'll have you out of there in 30 seconds. Sarah spent the next day preparing for the meeting. She reviewed her cover story, memorized the details of the fake cable project, and mentally rehearsed various scenarios for how the meeting might unfold. Her SEAL training had included extensive work in undercover operations, but this felt different. This was personal. The restaurant Dr. Chen had chosen was a small establishment on Grant Avenue in the heart of Chinatown. Sarah arrived early and positioned herself at a table where she could observe the entrance while maintaining clear sightlines to the surveillance team's positions. Dr. Chen arrived precisely on time. He was Asian, middle-aged, well-dressed, and carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to authority. As he approached her table, Sarah noted the careful way he scanned the restaurant and the practiced manner in which he seated himself, with his back to the wall and a clear view of all exits. Dr. Mitchell, thank you for agreeing to meet with me, he said with a slight accent that Sarah couldn't immediately identify. Thank you for reaching out, Sarah replied. I'm always interested in working with experienced research organizations. They spent the first 20 minutes discussing the technical aspects of underwater cable installation and environmental monitoring. Dr. Chen demonstrated extensive knowledge of the subject matter and asked probing questions about the specific requirements of Sarah's project. The cable route you've described is particularly challenging, he observed. The depth variations in current patterns in that area would require very specialized survey equipment. Sarah nodded. That's why I'm interested in partnering with organizations that have experience in deep water operations. Dr. Chen leaned forward slightly. Our organization has conducted similar surveys for defense contractors. We understand the importance of discretion and the need for detailed, accurate data. What kind of previous work have you done? Sarah asked. Environmental assessments for submarine communication systems, mostly in the Pacific. We've worked extensively off the coasts of Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines. Sarah felt a chill of recognition. Those were exactly the locations where Chinese naval intelligence would want detailed underwater terrain data for submarine operations. That sounds like valuable experience, she said carefully. Dr. Chen smiled. We pride ourselves on providing comprehensive data that serves multiple purposes. Our clients appreciate the thoroughness of our work. The euphemistic language was clear to Sarah. He was talking about intelligence gathering disguised as environmental research. This was definitely their target. I'd be interested in seeing examples of your previous work, Sarah said. Do you have sample reports or data that you could share? Of course. In fact, I brought some materials that might interest you. Dr. Chen reached into his briefcase and withdrew a folder. As he opened it, Sarah caught a glimpse of documents that looked very familiar. They were formatted exactly like the fake reports that had been produced using her identity. These are environmental assessments we completed last year for underwater communication installations, he said, sliding several pages across the table. Sarah studied the documents carefully. They were professionally produced, scientifically accurate, and completely fraudulent. More importantly, they contained specific details about underwater terrain that could only have been gathered through extensive field research. This is impressive work, Sarah said. The level of detail is exactly what my project would require. Chen's eyes glinted with satisfaction. We believe in being thorough.
Our field teams are highly experienced, and we have access to specialized equipment that allows us to gather data that other organizations cannot. What kind of specialized equipment? Sarah asked.
Sarah?
Sonar mapping systems, underwater positioning devices, marine life monitoring sensors. We also have diving teams with military training who can conduct hands-on surveys in challenging environments.
There it was, the admission that they had military-trained divers and specialized intelligence-gathering equipment. Sarah now had enough evidence to prove that Dr. Chen's organization was conducting espionage operations under the cover of environmental research. That sounds like exactly what I need, Sarah said.
When could we begin work on my project? Dr. Chen consulted his phone.
We could start within 2 weeks. However, projects of this sensitivity require special arrangements. What kind of special arrangements? The work would need to be conducted under your consulting credentials. Our organization prefers to maintain a low profile on defense-related contracts. Sarah's heart rate increased. He was asking her to front the operation using her legitimate business identity, exactly what they had done with the Chilean operation. I understand the need for discretion, Sarah said. How would that arrangement work? You would be the consultant of record, responsible for client communications and final report delivery. Our teams would conduct the field work and data analysis. Financially, you would receive 20% of the total contract value as a consulting fee.
It was a sophisticated operation designed to use legitimate consultants as unwitting fronts for espionage activities. Sarah realized that the real Dr.
Sarah Mitchell might never have known her identity was being used for intelligence gathering. That sounds reasonable, Sarah said. What would be the total value of the contract? For a project of this scope, approximately $2 million. Sarah managed to keep her expression neutral, but internally she was amazed at the scale of the operation. A $400,000 consulting fee would be tempting enough to convince many legitimate consultants to participate without asking too many questions.
I'd need to see the specific terms of the arrangement, Sarah said. Dr. Hablin. Chen reached back into his briefcase and withdrew another document.
This is a standard partnership agreement we use for sensitive projects. You can review it and get back to me with any questions. As he handed her the document, Sarah noticed something that made her pulse quicken. Dr. Chen was wearing a ring with a distinctive design, a Naval Academy class ring. But not from the U.S. Naval Academy. The design was foreign, and Sarah's training in intelligence recognition told her it was from the Chinese Naval Academy. This looks comprehensive, Sarah said, glancing at the partnership agreement.
I'll need a few days to review it with my attorney. Of course. Take all the time you need.
But I should mention that we have a narrow window for beginning this project. If we can't start within the next 3 weeks, we'll have to postpone until next year. The artificial deadline was designed to pressure her into making a quick decision without thorough legal review. It was another confirmation that this was a fraudulent operation.
I understand, Sarah said. I'll get back to you by the end of the week. Dr. Chen stood and extended his hand. I look forward to working with you, Dr. Gobb.
Mitchell, I think this partnership will be very beneficial for both of us. As they shook hands, Sarah noticed that Dr. Chen's grip was firmer than would be expected from an academic researcher. His hands had the calloused strength of someone who had done physical training and manual labor. Exactly what she would expect from a former military diver. After Dr. Chen left the restaurant, Sarah remained at her table for another 10 minutes reviewing the documents he had provided and making mental notes of everything she had observed. When she finally left, she walked directly to a nearby coffee shop where Marcus was waiting. "How did it go?" Marcus asked as Sarah sat down at his table.
We've got them, Sarah said.
Dr. Chen is definitely military trained, probably Chinese naval intelligence. The organization he represents is conducting espionage operations using stolen identities from American consultants.
Sarah briefed Marcus on the details of the meeting, including the partnership arrangement, the artificial deadline, and her observations about Dr. Chen's background and training.
We need to move fast, Marcus said. If they're operating on a 3-week timeline, they're probably planning to begin field operations soon. There's something else, Sarah added.
The scale of this operation is much larger than we thought. They're offering consulting fees of hundreds of thousands of dollars, which means they're working with budgets in the millions.
This isn't a small-time espionage operation. This is a major intelligence program. Marcus was already reaching for his phone. I'm calling for a full tactical response. We need to arrest Dr. Chen and roll up his entire network before they can eliminate any more witnesses or begin new operations.
Wait, Sarah said. If we arrest him now, we'll only get one person.
The partnership agreement he gave me probably contains contact information for other members of his organization. If we play this out a little longer, we might be able to identify the entire network.
Marcus considered this. How long would we need? Give me 2 days to respond to his offer.
I'll set up a follow-up meeting to discuss the partnership details. That should give us enough time to identify his associates and locate their base of operations.
It's risky, Marcus said. If they get suspicious, they could disappear completely.
Sarah smiled. Then we'll just have to make sure they don't get suspicious. After all, I'm just a marine biology consultant who's interested in a lucrative partnership opportunity. 2 days later, Sarah called Dr. Chen and arranged a second meeting. This time, he brought 2 associates, a woman who introduced herself as Dr. Lisa Wong and a man who called himself Dr. James Liu. Both had the same carefully cultivated academic personas and the same underlying military bearing that Sarah had noticed in Dr. Otson. Chen. The second meeting took place in a conference room at a downtown hotel.
The surveillance team had the entire floor under observation, with agents positioned in adjacent rooms and monitoring all electronic communications. We're very pleased that you've decided to move forward with our partnership, Dr. Chen said as they reviewed the contract details. I think it will be beneficial for everyone involved.
I do have a few questions about the operational timeline. Dr. Wong consulted a tablet. We're planning to begin the preliminary surveys next week. The field work should take approximately 6 weeks, with final reports delivered by the end of the quarter.
Sarah pretended to study the timeline while actually noting the specific dates and locations mentioned in their discussion. Everything they said was being recorded by the surveillance team, building a comprehensive case against the entire operation.
The survey areas you've identified are quite extensive, Sarah observed. You'll need a large team and specialized equipment. Dr.
Liu nodded. We have research vessels positioned in San Francisco Bay and Los Angeles. Our diving teams are already in position, and our equipment has been cleared through customs as scientific research materials. The casual mention of equipment being cleared through customs suggested that the operation had official cover from somewhere in the Chinese government. This was definitely a state-sponsored intelligence operation, not a private criminal enterprise.
I'm impressed by the scope of your organization's capabilities, Sarah said.
Chen smiled. We've been building these capabilities for several years. This project represents the culmination of significant investment in personnel and equipment. How many similar projects have you completed? Sarah asked. This will be our 7th major operation in the Pacific region, Dr. Wong replied. We found that working through local consulting partners like yourself provides the best operational security. 7 operations. Sarah realized they were dealing with a sophisticated, long-running espionage program that had been operating under the radar for years.
The Chilean operation that had first brought this to light was just one small part of a much larger intelligence gathering effort.
I'd like to meet some of your field team members, Sarah said.
As the consultant of record, I should be familiar with the people who will be conducting the actual research. The 3 exchanged glances, and Sarah could see them weighing the risks and benefits of introducing her to more members of their organization. That can be arranged. Dr.
Chen said finally. Perhaps tomorrow we could visit one of our research vessels. You could meet the dive team leaders and familiarize yourself with our equipment. Sarah's pulse quickened. If she could get access to their research vessel, the surveillance team could identify the entire operational team and gather evidence of their espionage equipment. That sounds perfect, Sarah said. Where is the vessel located? Pier 33, berth 7. We can meet there tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock.
As the meeting concluded, Sarah shook hands with all 3 conspirators and confirmed the arrangements for the next day. She was walking out of the hotel when Marcus's voice crackled through her earpiece. Outstanding work. We've identified the research vessels, and our surveillance teams are already in position. Tomorrow we take them down.
Sarah smiled as she walked through the hotel lobby. After days of playing the role of a naive consultant, she was looking forward to showing these people exactly who they had been trying to deceive. Copy that, she whispered into her collar microphone. Time to end this charade. The next morning, Sarah arrived at Pier 33 to find Dr. Chen waiting beside a large research vessel that looked legitimate enough to fool most casual observers. What the Chinese operatives didn't know was that federal agents had been watching the vessel all night and were now positioned throughout the marina. Welcome aboard the Pacific Explorer, Dr. Chen said as he led Sarah up the gangplank. Let me introduce you to our dive team. As they walked onto the deck, Sarah saw exactly what she expected. A crew of fit, military-trained men who were clearly more comfortable with weapons than with scientific instruments.
The equipment on deck included items that had nothing to do with environmental research and everything to do with intelligence gathering. "This is quite an impressive setup," Sarah said, looking around the vessel.
"We believe in using the best equipment available," Dr. Chen replied proudly. That's when Sarah heard Marcus's voice in her earpiece. "All teams, execute, execute, execute." The takedown was swift and professional. Federal agents swarmed the vessel from multiple directions while Coast Guard boats surrounded the Pacific Explorer to prevent any escape by water.
Within minutes, Dr. Chen and his entire team were in custody, and Sarah was finally able to drop her cover.
"Dr. Chen," Sarah said as federal agents secured him in handcuffs. "I should probably mention that I'm not exactly the marine biology consultant you thought I was." Chen's eyes widened as he realized he had been deceived. "Who are you?" Sarah smiled and allowed her full military bearing to show for the first time since this operation began.
Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, United States Navy SEALs. And you just made the mistake of underestimating the wrong person.
As the Chinese operatives were led away in custody, Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction. They had not only stopped a major espionage operation, but had also avenged the death of James Patterson and prevented the murders of other identity theft victims.
Investigation eventually revealed that the Chinese operation had been running for 3 years and had compromised the identities of 12 former U.S. military personnel. The intelligence they had gathered included detailed surveys of underwater terrain around major U.S. naval installations and submarine communication routes throughout the Pacific. Sarah's role in stopping the operation remained classified, but she received a commendation from the Secretary of the Navy for her service to national security. More importantly, she had proven that being underestimated could be the most dangerous mistake an enemy could make. 3 months later, Sarah was back in her consulting office in San Francisco, working on legitimate environmental projects and enjoying her peaceful civilian life. But she kept her SEAL training sharp, because she had learned that you never really know when your country might need you to answer the call again. They restrained her and thought she was helpless, then discovered why you never underestimate a Navy SEAL.